Welcome to the MBP, the Micah Brown podcast, where I have the privilege of connecting you, my listeners, my audience, my friends, with interesting people in an intentional way. I do that through two facets. One is I know that right now we tend to miss out on the relational aspect of being fellow human beings. A lot of times we'll address other people based on the statistics that they're mentioning or the facts that they're mentioning and miss the whole point is that we're two human beings interacting. So the way I approach that is through connecting with my guests first in a personal way. What obstacles have they overcome? What is their background like? What's their family like? What personal things are they engaged in right now so that you can better connect with them, relate with them, and understand where they're coming from? Maybe you have something in common. Who knows? We won't know until we ask, right? And then the second aspect of that is by getting into what interesting things are they doing. That could be in their professional life. That could be in something that they're just involved with outside of their typical 9-to-5 job. It could be any number of things. Maybe it's just something on the public stage. Nonetheless, those are the two sides of the same coin that make up a person, and I want to get into knowing more about each side of that person that I get to have on the show, get to interview. I really appreciate you listening right now. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any great interviews that I have upcoming. And in addition to that, I want to thank you for supporting the podcast. If you want to continue to do so, you can. I'm going to have other ways coming up soon, but for now, by getting your free trial through audibletrial.com/MBP, not only will you be supporting the podcast, but that gives you an easy opportunity to look up some of the books that we've mentioned on previous episodes, maybe some of the guests have mentioned, and listen to those for free for 30 days. I would strongly recommend you keep it because it's actually a really great resource to have anytime that you're driving or just doing something, maybe lawn care outside of your own home. Who knows what it is? But it's a great resource to have. So again, audibletrial.com/MBP. And anytime you sign up for a free new account, that will support the podcast. So I thank you in advance for that. Finally, to some very specific people who have supported this podcast already. First, to Alvin Brown, who has helped set up this podcast, get it off the ground, get it going, and continues to support me behind the scenes. Second would be to the man, the myth, the legend who has created our music that we now use on this show, Isaiah Cruz. Phenomenal musician, even more phenomenal human being. And last but not least, I want to thank you to the sponsorship that Thelma's Treats has offered to the Micah Brown podcast. Guys, listen, here's the thing. Here's how this went down. I saw an ice cream sandwich and I thought that looks very delicious, and it's super hot here in Austin, Texas. So what did I do? Like a normal, sane human being, I bought the ice cream sandwich, ate it before I even made it to my car. I thought, that's amazing. I need more of that in my life. Reached out to Thelma's and just said, hey, y'all make a fantastic product. I want more. Is there anything I can do to help you guys out? They said, just get the word out. I can't tell you how easy it is for me to tell you about Thelma's Treats. If you need a good ice cream sandwich, if your kids need a good ice cream sandwich, if it's way too hot outside and you just need something to put a smile on your face, get yourself an ice cream sandwich. Treat yourself, as they say on Parks and Rec. That's all I got. Enjoy. My guest today is Bryan Flanagan. Bryan is a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a 1971 graduate of Louisiana State University, but he didn't let that stop him from being successful. He began his career as a delivery boy for the IBM Corporation in Baton Rouge. He then invested the next 14 years with IBM as a salesman, a, quote, people manager, and a sales instructor at IBM's National Training Center. In 1984, Bryan joined the Zig Ziglar Corporation in Dallas, Texas. For the next 20 years, he served clients in a variety of industries, ranging from professional services to high-tech to pharmaceutical companies. In 2005, Bryan founded Flanagan Training Group. In this capacity, he designs and delivers training programs that improve team and individual productivity and growth. Humor is more natural to him than not much else, and anytime he speaks, his audience laughs while still learning how to be the best in their profession. Anyone, literally anyone who meets Bryan will leave with knowledge, encouragement, and a smile. With that being said, it's my honor to have on my show today as my guest and my friend, Bryan Flanagan. Mr. Flanagan, I appreciate you being on the Michael Brown podcast. How are you today?
My pleasure. I'm doing well.
Good. I know you've told me your family has been dealing with some health issues, but it sounds like at least things are headed in a generally correct direction.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Yeah,
Good.
I've got 3 generations of women living with me that are high risk during this virus. And
So
from mother-in-law to wife down to 35-year-old daughter. But we're doing fine. Thank goodness it's the women who are sick because the guys couldn't handle it.
Nope. Yeah. Having had COVID myself, I am very grateful that I was the one that caught it, because if Elizabeth caught it, we'd all be just messed up.
Boy,
We wouldn't know which way was up.
You do not want me to be your primary caregiver.
Love that. I wanted to start with just our conversation today, just a general background. Share for us a little bit of what you've experienced in life growing up, how you met your wife, kids, anything that you'd want to talk about. I did share a little bit in your introduction that you've seen, but wanted to give you the floor to start with a little bit of your background.
Sure. I had an idyllic childhood. I was raised by 2 Christian parents who, the salt of the earth. I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My mom and dad had my brother about 9 years before me and my sister 3 years before. And I just had one of those childhoods. I had no complaints. They allowed us to do what we wanted to do and be safe, make sure they had a corrective course, and we got off track a little bit. And my youth was filled mainly with sports. I was a sports guy. So my dad played professional baseball, never made it to the big leagues. He met my mother in 1936 because of baseball. They moved from North and Central Louisiana down to Baton Rouge to take a job at Exxon. My dad was recruited to pitch, coach, organize, recruit the semi-pro baseball team. So
Wow.
we were raised by a dad who used a lot of baseball analogies. And so I went to school there. The life changer for me was that in 1966, I had a blind date with a lady named Cindy Katie, who became my wife 50 years ago. And that was a turning point. Obviously, I found the strongest woman I could, and I married her. It took us 4 years, but we got married while we were in her senior year in college, and Micah, my second senior year in college. So we've been married
Victory
for
lap.
50 years. Pardon, yeah.
Victory lap.
Yeah, and we had so much confidence in our marriage that we actually got married on Friday the 13th, November 13th, Friday the 13th.
There you go.
Yeah, and the reason we did is that LSU played Mississippi State on Saturday the 14th. So we've been married 50 years. We moved to Dallas. I was with IBM for a number of years, and 8 years into that tenure, we moved to Dallas. We adopted our first child. Patrick and Quinn are both adopted from the Methodist Mission Home in San Antonio, Texas. We're blessed, unlike you, who created your children through unskilled labor. We actually had to qualify to be parents. They took fingerprints. So that's my background with my family. My son's now 40, living in Austin. They have our first
wonderful guy.
baby.
Wonderful guy.
He's a good guy. His mother did good with him. And we have a daughter that's 35, and we live in Plano, Texas, and enjoy it here. And I'm still working. I'm a trainer. I train primarily sales and presentation skills.
And just for those listening, it's not plain old Texas. It's Plano, Texas. I know I have some other people from around the United States and world listening. It's not plain old Texas. That's not an accent. That's actually a place.
That's not an accent. It's actually a place.
Yes, sir. So you've transitioned from working at IBM, and you've got, grown kids and everything, but now you're training people, and that's with your company. So just kind of briefly, how long have you been doing that with your own company?
Yeah, my professional career, I started off as a delivery boy with IBM, as I say, my second senior year. And I was lucky because my grades weren't that good. I did finish, but it was rough. And I went to work for IBM as a delivery boy my last year. We graduated, got married during our senior year in college. Cindy went to teach school, and then I was a delivery boy for the last year. Then they hired me, and I sold typewriters and copiers with the IBM Corporation. That was back in the day before the explosion with the new technology. So I did that in 1978. They promoted me to the National Training Center here in Dallas as a sales instructor who couldn't sell. Those who can do, those who can't teach, and those who can't teach sales. And I got here in 1978, had the fortune of meeting a guy named Zig Ziglar. I begged him for a job. I went out to California for a couple of years to earn my manager's stripes, came back and went to work for Zig in 1984. Worked for him for about 29 years. And the last part of my career, I've been on my own with Flanagan Training Group.
Excellent. Love that. We're going to get into a little bit more about Zig and that whole transition and what you learned. But the first and most important question I like to start with any of my guests on the show is, what obstacles or events in your life have most shaped your character, and how? You can offer as many or as few examples as you like.
Well, I've had a lot of shaping to do.
Still a work in progress, like me.
Yeah. Well, the first event that really happened that shaped my life was when I was 18, and May 7th, 1966, I had a blind date with Cindy, and one of us fell in love. It was me. It wasn't her. And unfortunately, she regained her sight and wouldn't go out with me until December of 1966. Man,
playing hard.
I did a lot of selling in that time. But Cindy and I have been together a long time, and that was a huge part of my life that really gave me purpose and direction. My dad died in 1968 when I was a sophomore, and that made me grow up a little bit. And I mourned him probably a semester, probably 2 semesters, because it was March of 1968, and Dad and I were real close. And that was a big blow for me. But it did shape me and reminded me what Dad had taught us. And he did a great job of teaching. My dad did not have a college degree. My mother did. But Dad worked 2 jobs. He worked 33 years in those days it was Esso, but now it's Exxon. But he also took a part-time job with State Farm selling insurance part-time. And he did that until he died. He worked with Exxon. My mother worked with him. So I saw a work ethic. Then my brother got out of the Marine Corps. Now, he joined the Marines because our dad was too strict. But he got out, and he and my mother worked together until my brother retired, probably when he was in his mid-70s, and my mother retired at 90. But so Dad died, had a great impact. And then the biggest impact on my professional career happened when I got a hold of Zig Ziglar's material. And Zig Ziglar's material really turned me around. Now, he was a motivational speaker, a trainer. When I got to know him, he had authored 4 books. He then went on to author 28 more. And that led me to work with him later on. But the biggest thing that happened to me, Michael, was I was always in church, but I was a belonger, not a believer. And of course, a major thing that happened was when I developed a personal relationship with Christ. And that went into 1988 when I found out this little 5-letter word called grace. I had earned I tried to play basketball at LSU without a scholarship, and I was a walk-on, so I had to earn my place on the team. I had to earn Cindy's second date in December of 1966. So I had to earn my sales, earn my promotion. So I was always a performance-based guy. For me to have self-acceptance, I did it on performance-based. And when I read that all the winning had been done, all the battling had been done 2,000 years ago, that was a foreign concept to me. My life has changed because somebody loved me so much that he went to the cross for me. And I didn't know that ideal. I had no idea about that. In 1988, a counselor told me, go find out what that is. And so I didn't have a Damascus Road experience per se, but over a period of time, I discovered grace. And that happened when I was 40. So for the last 32 years, as Zig Ziglar would say, if you find Christ now, it'll help you now, but it'll also keep the heat off of you later. So that was the biggest change, was that when I found Christ.
Man, I love that. 3 different experiences. My relationship with my wife is also one of my biggest events. and most shape my character. How far down, this is almost equally as important, how far down on your list of colleges was LSU, and who suckered you into going there?
Well, I got offers from the Harvard of the South,
Oh, yeah.
which was
Mississippi
Tulane.
State? Tulane? Oh, okay. Because I've got people from Mississippi State, people from Ole Miss,
Oh yeah,
both
it
saying
depends on
those are
where
the
you.
Harvard. Exactly.
Well, the joke is when I was at LSU, it was just a big high school with ashtrays. I've been a Tiger.
And it hasn't changed since. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no ambition. Had to get an LSU Tiger. Had to get an LSU graduate off your front porch. Pay for the pizza. But I was a Tiger. At one time I wanted to play football for them. That didn't work. But I could play basketball a little bit. So I wanted to be a Tiger and be on the LSU basketball team. So sure enough, I went out and made the team. The problem was the guy that was in my position was a guy named Pete Maravich, who just happened to be the greatest offensive player in the history of the game. We didn't know that when he started as a freshman. And in those days, freshmen couldn't play varsity. So we had a freshman team, and I made the freshman team without a scholarship. And then Pete went on and averaged 44.2 points a game for the next 3 seasons. So we saw the beginning. I didn't play much with Pete, but I did shower several times with him. I was in the locker room, but that's okay. We combined for 54 points one night. He got 53.
Yeah, I was about to say, how many did he get?
But that got me in Sports Illustrated. I wrote a letter to the editor of Sports Illustrated. They had an article about Pete Maravich, because nobody's heard of him these days. You're too young to remember it. But they had an article about how great he was in the college. And I wrote the article basically said, my letter basically said, we didn't know what we had, but what we had was a guy that was good. And the way he got good, he dedicated his life to it. And in that I put, he had my scholarship. And we combined for 54 points. Well, I got an email back from Sports Illustrated that said, well, Mr. Flanagan, we can't confirm that you actually got 54 points with him. So I had to go back to my archives and look at the box scores. I scored a single point. And before I could write them back, the next day they said, well, was that against the Baton Rouge Hawks, which was an AAU team, if that on this date? I said, yeah, that was it. And so they published my letter.
That's great. And for those wondering, that is a version of sales. You're selling yourself to ESPN, saying, "Put me in there."
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sports Illustrated. Yeah, it was Sports Illustrated.
Sports Illustrated. There you go.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned your 2 children. How many grandchildren do you have, and how many grandchildren do you wish you have? Just to add a little bit of pressure on Pat and his sister.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on my children. In our church circle of the 16 people we have in our small group, we're the only ones that aren't grandparents. So 18 months ago, Patrick and Jennifer finally made us grandparents. And I show this baby's picture everywhere because some people claim their grandkids are the prettiest in the world. Well, I got proof.
There you go.
Yeah, so we have one grandson who lives in Austin, and we don't see him enough, but we do a lot of FaceTime.
There you go. I love that. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Pat. He's a fantastic man. And I know that, like you said, he was adopted. I'd love for you to share about both of your children's adoption and what has that meant to your family. I'd love for people out there to hear how it has affected you and your family dynamic.
We knew each other for 4 years before we got married. We were compatible when we got to, and we were trying to have children in Baton Rouge, but those days in vitro wasn't around. I tell people, hopefully humorously, when we got to Dallas, we went to a fertility specialist. Now, we'd never heard of a fertility specialist in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so they said, what was he like? I said, well, he came out with a bison head on and a stick and something around his neck and a garlic
shaker. Yeah.
He didn't know what he was doing. I mean, it was like a voodoo. It was like a witch doctor. And he told us as much. He said, we really haven't perfected this, so you guys may want to start the adoption proceedings. And Micah, they never could really pinpoint what was the cause of us being our infertility. So we wrote to 21 charities around the nation, around Texas, and the Methodist Mission Home, the Southwest Maternity Center, there on Whitby Road in San Antonio. met with us. We went to a church, had a group meeting, then we went down there and interviewed. They do take fingerprints. They look under the bed. They have home visits. So we worked real hard, and then a year and a half later, Patrick was placed with us. We went out to California and tried to adopt out there, and it was weird. In California, it got its own set of circumstances. So we worked real hard to get back to Dallas, and 2 years after we got back to Dallas, Quinn was placed with us in January of 1985. And you know, because you tried to have children, and you guys have had your challenges with that, with Elizabeth and you. Anytime we're talking about children, obviously we're talking about a sensitive issue and heartfelt. We don't know the difference. So when people ask us questions, how is it different from having a natural child? Well, we didn't adopt one, then have one ourselves. We didn't have one, then adopt one. Both of our children were placed with us through God's grace.
There's no comparison to go off of.
So we did the same thing I would have done had I known that Cindy was pregnant. When we started the proceedings, I'm very much into family. So I wrote Patrick and later on Quinn, I wrote them letters before they were ever born, before they were placed with us. And I talked about our family and about our background and what we were going through. And then up until they didn't want to read them anymore, up until about the 6th or 7th grade, I stopped writing them letters about what's happening, what Dad did to change careers, those kind of things. Only because I knew I'd forget, and if they ever wanted to know a basis of how much we love them and why we did all of this, I would have it in writing. And I'm doing the same thing to Declan. Declan Patrick Flanagan is my grandson. He's with the FBI, full-blooded Irish. And I want Declan to know that his grandmom and grandpop love him unconditionally, and we're so proud of him, and his mom and dad are great people. So I encourage that to anybody out there, whether you're a grandparent or whether you're a parent or whether you're about to be a mom or dad. I believe that the more you correspond and leave them those things, they can look back on it and perhaps understand things that mom and dad didn't have time to tell them, told them, but they forgot, things like that.
Got it. How did that, as they were growing up, I know my sister has 3 adopted kids. She has 2 biological kids and then 3 adopted girls, all sisters from the same mother and father.
Good for them. Yeah.
Which it wasn't planned that way. They adopted 2 and then the mom got pregnant with the same dad and had a 3rd, and they ended up with Janae as well. I know some of the struggles that they've been through, some of the conversations that the kids even talk about with them. The girls talking about their tummy mommy and where's my tummy mommy, and well, are you my mommy? I mean, you're my mommy, but that sort of thing. Did any of that take place? I would assume so to some degree or another because of the situation. It's the same adoption, but how did that dynamic occur in your world as they grew up? And what, I don't think you said, maybe you did. What age were Pat and Quinn when they came to you?
Patrick was 9 days old and Quinn was 3 weeks old. So it's a different dynamic from what your sister did. She adopted children that weren't infants. What happens is that I'm not shy. I'm pretty transparent about telling people, for example, when I get in front of a group, I'll say how many have children, how many don't have children, how many are too bitter to talk about it. And I say that we were blessed, our children were adopted. And that's a little subtle way of saying, with all the abortion going on, there's an option. And I'm hopefully a normal guy in front of these salespeople or this group of people. And I think I'm a normal guy, and normal people adopt babies. So if you haven't looked at the adoption option, please do so. And I don't say that, but I indicate it. And so we were blessed with Patrick at 9 days and Quinn with 3 weeks. There's a big challenge with adopting an older child. Very much needed. Right. In our days, Micah, they had closed adoption. So we went down to the Methodist Mission Home in San Antonio. They would announce in the last trimester that some of the pregnant women would be on campus. and they would announce, we have couples coming in to tour the facility from Houston, San Antonio, and Plano, and the girls would go to their dorm rooms. They didn't want to be seen. It was still a scarlet letter. That was closed adoption. Later on, 5 years later with Quinn, it was more open. And we had the opportunity to either meet the birth parents or not meet the birth parents or the birth mother. So now that I was on a Christian adoption agency up here in Plano and in Frisco, and what couples would do, it's changed so much, they would put together, lack of a better term, they would put together a scrapbook. My dog is squeezing a ball in the background. They would put together a scrapbook and present it to the different mothers, the mothers to be, and they would choose, the moms chose who they'd place their baby with. So I was on the adoption agency, and we had our first meeting, and I thought I was doing pretty well. Then they handed out these dossiers, and I said, what are these? Well, these are the people that have applied, but we've got to okay them. We got to approve them. Well, everybody's got letters from their minister, their boss, whatever. No. We want to make sure that, well, here's a lady from Pittsburgh. Why are we not looking at her? A couple from Pittsburgh. Well, because the birth mother wouldn't have a relationship with the baby if the baby was born in Texas and the adoptive parents are somewhere else. Well, that never occurred to me because we'd adopted so long ago that we didn't have a relationship with the birth parents. And we didn't necessarily want one. Now, fast forward, normally what we find is that the adopted girls are the ones that really want to find out who their birth parents are. Quinn, our daughter Quinn, doesn't care. Patrick went out and investigated.
Yeah, he told me about this.
Yeah, and it's a great story. So his birth dad and his birth dad's half sister and his birth dad's wife, they were at his wedding, which was kind of a neat closure.
Yeah.
Now I've heard stories that didn't go that well, but at the same time, we encourage them to seek their birth parents if in fact they did it the right way. And Patrick did.
Yeah. And he was much older when he decided to look into that.
Yeah, 35, 36.
Yeah. Yeah, adoption is something that Elizabeth and I have gone back and forth on. We've seen it with my sister's family. A handful of my friends, Justin and David, they both have adopted kids at different ages. One was a little bit older. And then in the case of Dave, they adopted an infant, brand new, like went to the hospital and everything. So it's something that we've talked about. It's not necessarily something we feel that drive, that urge, that calling to this is what we need to do, but it's definitely something we've talked about. So I always like to hear other people's stories of what has it been like, because your experience, like you said, is very different than adopting a kid who's already 5 or 4 or something, able to cognitively understand a little bit of what's going on. It's a very different dynamic.
Yeah, and there's all kind of studies and books, and we encourage kids to read those and talk about those and go to counseling about it. Our little girl really has no desire to do so. But Patrick, my mother lived to be 99, and I've got her innards, and I would get out of a doctor's appointment. I'd call my mom and say, Mom, thanks for your innards. My triglycerides are under control, no cholesterol problem. And I'd go home and tell the kids, thank God I have my mother, your grandmother's innards. Well, Patrick's term was, well, I don't know whose innards I have. and he told me that at 35. And I said, son, I'm sorry, I never thought about that. But sure, it'd be nice to know. So that's when he went on his quest.
Yeah.
And he did it right. And it was very meaningful.
What's interesting, and this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, something Elizabeth and I have been talking about is figuring out our own heritages of what our, background, our genetic makeup sort of thing. And in a way, it's kind of the same thing. Where did I come from? Mm-hmm. But for people who were not adopted, they were just birthed into their family. No choice in that matter as far as like family placement for the parents and kids and all that. But we don't really think about that a whole lot. I'm sure for Pat, it's a top of mind question all the time of, okay, I know who my dad is. I know who my mom is, but where did I come from? So I think it's a good exercise for people to investigate where did I come from, both from a in his case, a familial standpoint. In our case, it's like a genetic heritage ancestor type of situation.
Yeah, but as long as the birth parents are willing, you don't want to interrupt somebody's life.
Right.
And what happened is that Patrick went on one of these registries, the 123 or Ancestry, whatever, and he swabbed and his birth father swabbed, and they kind of came together. And then Patrick found out the story of what happened. And then it was, like I said, very enlightening, very strong, in a very positive way.
Yeah, I've heard of some of those instances not resulting in a very amiable situation, and it's tough. In the theme of relationships, I wanted to ask you about your interactions with strangers, which may sound funny. There's a point to this.
Who told you about that?
Yeah, exactly. Pat told me about that. As far back as he can remember, he always knew that you were striking up conversations with strangers on planes and cars, basically anywhere, which for the record sounds a lot like my mother. Just she has this invisible sign on her forehead, as she says, that says, "Tell me your life story." So anywhere she goes, she's picking up conversations. But you usually made the conversation, in his words, and I've now witnessed this firsthand, you usually make the conversation about them and always have that person laughing about something. And I can say this is 100% accurate to my own personal experience with you, because from the onset of meeting you, I felt comfortable talking to you. And I knew I wanted to have a friendship with you as much as you would let me. So I have to know, when you meet someone for the first time, what goes through your mind, or what's your goal for that conversation? Is it just completely natural and you just, whatever, I'll talk to anybody that talks to me? Or is it something that you've kind of set out to do, maybe something that Zig had instilled in you, or something that you had picked up along the way?
Where are you in the birth order of your sisters and brothers? What number are you in the?
I'll let you take a guess first.
Where were you firstborn?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm the baby of the family.
Okay, so you and I have got the curse.
Yeah, and you're the third, right?
I'm the last. I'm the baby.
But you had two older siblings, you said, brother and sister?
One that's 10 years older, one that's 3 years old.
Well, so my brother is 10 years older than me also, and my sister is 8 years older than me. So I know a little bit of how you feel.
So there's a 8-year gap between you and your sister.
Right. So I have kind of what Elizabeth also has, because her two half brothers are much older than her also. I think 13 and 10 or 12 and 10, something like that. And we both have, you talk about those like inner family dynamics of the oldest child syndrome or youngest or whatever. Yeah. We both kind of have the youngest child, but also the only child mixed in a little bit.
That's right. Because there's a 5-year gap, and usually the 5-year gap is when it turns.
Right.
So now check this out. The first 23 U.S. astronauts in outer space were firstborn. 21 were firstborn, 2 were onlys, which meant that they had a leadership position at their homes that you and I, as babies of the family, didn't have. So when mom and dad left and said, take care of your younger brother and sister, well, if they got in trouble, they blamed it on you.
Absolutely. Still do.
So what happens is my brother, the Marine, he was very independent. He wanted his own agency, didn't want to go into management. He just wanted to run his business. Very driven. My sister, in between, she kept my brother from beating me up. So she was a mediator. And then I come along, I get no attention, so I act out. I become the class clown. That resonated a little bit there.
Still are to this day. Yeah, I would say my actual school experience was probably different. I was bullied and picked on, but as I've grown up, I am definitely the one. I mean, you know this from firsthand. We both have those one-liner quips or the quick-witted remarks about whatever. In my situation, it's usually dad jokes, or
dad jokes. Yeah.
I feel like you'll resonate with this. I've told Elizabeth before, I have to be really careful because I'm quick-witted, but sometimes words fly out a lot faster than they probably should. And I get myself in trouble because I just say the first thing top of mind. And sometimes it's socially unacceptable, and I have to be real careful about who I say it around.
My wife, Cindy, has 10 impeccable sentences. And that's one of them. I said to Cindy one time back when I was about 30, I said, I'm as funny as Jay Darden. She said, no, you're not. Why not? Because he's in control. What do you mean in control? He has a thermostat. You don't have a thermostat. He can control when he needs to stop. You're on go on.
Your valve is open, wide open.
Oh, yeah, and there's no filter. A buddy of mine at IBM met my mother one time at some kind of function and said, well, Mrs. Flanagan, I work with your son, Bryan. And she said, is he still trying to entertain the world? So what happened was that my defense mechanism when the reason I love Zig so much is that my inferiority complex was with me until I was 30. So I was always burdened with potential, I guess, and didn't think I deserved it. So I used humor both in my high school and certainly in the fraternity at LSU. My humor was my defense mechanism. But here's what I've learned to answer your question. What I learned a long time ago, Micah, is that when I leave a conversation, and like, let's say we left the coffee shop in North Dallas and you were going to make some sales calls and I was going to go take a nap. When we left that conversation.
Because I wore you out that much. Was that the racquetball time or the coffee?
No, racquetball went out and ran 5 miles.
Yeah.
But I asked myself the question, after leaving this conversation, did I know more about Micah or did Micah know more about me? And that really is also a sales proposition. When you leave a conversation, a sales interaction with a potential customer, who knows more about whom? So my job is to, and plus I'm interested in it. I mean, it's nice to know that you play drums and you guys moved to wherever you moved to with to seed a church, and that you went to A&M because your transcripts wouldn't be, all those things that I learned about. So when I leave a conversation, that's one thing that I value, that I think I'll let you talk more than I did. So yesterday I was at one of the few face-to-face network meetings that we go to, and they always wand your forehead to make sure you don't have a fever. Right. and that's my goal going in, is I want to make sure after I have an interaction with a potential networking referral partner that I know more about them than they know about me. And so it's just asking and listening. And I've come, and here's a quick way to do that. I'll give you a sales lesson as well as a conversation lesson. POGO, P-O-G-O. That's a sales. I use it in sales, but I also use it in meeting people and building relationships. P stands for person. O stands for organization. G stands for goals. And O, the second O, stands for obstacles to those goals. So when I was at the networking meeting, I go up and introduce myself to Bobby. Bobby, you haven't been here before. What's your function at this function? And sometimes they'll catch it, sometimes they won't. I'll say, Bobby, what brings you here? And he gets a puzzled look on his face. I say, I'm here for the food. So I'm just trying to break the ice and let them know, hey, if you're a stranger, somebody brought you here and they haven't showed up yet, it's okay, let's mingle. And I try to do it with humor. I try to do it with levity. Sometimes it works. Not everybody buys my humor or my levity, obviously.
I feel that.
I resemble that, yeah. So that's this kind of the spirit behind it.
I love that. That's something that, as I've been married, I voiced to Elizabeth one time that I love to hear about other people, but I typically don't think of good questions right off the bat. I mean, even for this conversation, I sat down and thought through what I would ask you to have meaningful conversation. But on the fly, it's something I've had to develop because if you want to just open the valve wide open and tell me everything about your life and everything, I'm here for it.
You're open, yeah.
I'm very open to receiving. The trouble is, first of all, not hardly anybody really does that right when meeting somebody. But I don't think through fast enough questions to ask. And of course, I realized this once I got married because, as you probably have witnessed, you get home. Oh, how's Adrian's family doing? How's his wife? Are things going well? I know that this was happening with so-and-so's son. And did you ask him about that? No. What I wasn't even thinking about. Well, you knew that they were in the hospital. Right? Well, yeah, but I didn't. I figured he'd tell me if he wanted to talk about it. So I've had to practice asking questions.
There are two sexes. I don't know about genders these days, but women are really more relationship, and they want a little bit more detail on relationships. We want to fix things as guys, so we don't necessarily get into the relationship questions. Pogo allows me to find out, let's say that you're an accountant and you don't want to be open about yourself. You're a little bit more of an introvert. Well, when I start asking questions about the person, well, Bobby, what brings you? What kind of work are you in? Now, here's how I ask that question. I'll say, Michael, what do you do? I'm sorry, Michael, legally, what do you do for a living? Now, if they laugh at that or smile at that like you just did, I'll know that maybe they want to play a little bit. But if they look at me like I've got two heads, which I get a lot, then I don't spend much time in the person. But I'll say, what type of work are you in? How long have you done it? Where do you do it? What were you doing before this? So I can read the other person to know how open and playful they want to be versus the fact that I haven't earned the right with them to be playful yet. And I'll back off of that. And sometimes I miss it, and I'll admit that. And sometimes I can be overbearing. Very much I admit that. But I try to play off of it. And then I may ask somebody, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve by joining a networking group? So I don't get the obstacles necessarily, but I can ask questions about the person, the organization, and then what they're trying to achieve, where they want to be. And it's surface. It's not real deep because I haven't earned the right to go deep unless they give me the right. And they do that through their body language or through their answers. But there's a system to most things. I'm a big believer that selling is a process, communication is a process. And if you have a process, you can plug into that and it takes the pressure off of you.
That's brilliant. I would love for just our audience that's listening and probably either driving in their car, sitting at home, working. Can you tell us one more time what POGO stands for? Of course, right as you take a drink.
When I meet somebody for the first time, I start with the P, ask questions about the person. And that could be, how long you lived in Leander? Where were you before? What kind of work do you do? And that kind of leads into the occupation or the organization. But if it's a social thing, I can still ask, how big's your family? Where your kids are older, where do they live? Are they close? Are they far away? How many grand? All of those things still is about the occupation, the organization, the family. Sometimes I don't get to goals. The third step is asking them what they're trying to achieve. And then the last question, which I don't get to socially, is the obstacles to achieve those goals. For the salespeople or managers listening to this, it's really just a sales call on, let me get to know you, your organization. What are you trying to achieve? If I can help you achieve that, I become a hero. What obstacles are keeping you from achieving that? And if I can remove that obstacle or obstacles, perhaps I become a hero. And that sets us into the sales call. And I tell people, like Mike, I'd like to start out by asking a few questions about yourself, a little bit about the organization, some of the goals, the objectives you have, and then maybe some of the barriers that keep you from reaching those. That'll take about 20 minutes. That's still a good time frame for you. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of set the course. Now, I don't do that relationally, but I do that in the business sense because normally we have a finite time that the prospect has given me. But I still try to start with the person and find out they don't want to talk about themselves. Then I'll make as they say these days, a pivot. I'll make that adjustment.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, make a pivot, as they say these days. Before we kind of jump over into the professional, which I feel like even as we're talking, as would be the case for most human beings, personal and professional are intertwined in many ways. Yeah. But you told me this once, this list, and I would love for people listening to hear it. But what are Flanagan's 4 rules for success?
Well, unfortunately, you added one. Let me see, 4. Well, here's my first 3. And
I'll 3. I might have had it wrong. Added one too.
Here are my first 3, and the others are honorable mention. Let's do that. Number 1 rule of success, and you live this. You know this, Micah. Definitely. The number 1 rule of success: marry well. if you marry well, you'll have the home court advantage. And you can go out and you can perform your task. When Cindy was teaching, I supported her. When I was selling with IBM, she supported me. She wanted to be a homemaker. She wanted to raise children. We were blessed that we had the opportunity to do that. And she's always supported me. And I knew that my home life was solid. My home court advantage was always solid. So the number one rule of success to me, marry well. Number two, produce more than you consume. And unfortunately, not to be political or philosophical maybe, but we need to remind our countrymen to do that. We need to produce more than we consume. And the third thing, because I was running out of things to talk about, is nothing good ever came out of a bottle. But I'll give you my honorable mentions. Dad told us to play all 9 innings. Don't take an inning off. And he also told us show up on time, and show up dressed to play. And I saw him with 2 jobs, and he lived that. And then the one that I made up during baseball season, we were coaching the kids. Good things happen when you work hard. So that may be 5 or 6, I'm not sure, but the number one is still marry well. I'm sorry, that's it.
I got those down. I'm going to make sure that I share those. There's 6 total that you mentioned there, at least. I'm sure as soon as we get off here, there's one I could have mentioned. But for those listening, I remember when Bryan mentioned these to me the first time we ever met and had coffee. And my first knee-jerk reaction, I'll be honest with you, was I didn't need to marry to be successful. But then I started thinking about how my life personally has been different now that I've married Elizabeth. Now that we just celebrated 5 years together, or marriage together. And for me, my confidence level has dramatically changed since marrying Elizabeth, since being with her. And I mean that in a very positive way. People know this that have listened to the show. I've been bullied and picked on a lot growing up. So my external voices from other people have become internal voices, and she rewrote the script. And we did that through just the daily, today I love you because, today my compliment for you is, and hearing those things that I would have never admitted to myself has redirected that thought process. And because of that, now I go into new ventures and new experiences with a new level of confidence, and I can tackle it because I know I'm good with her. And I've told her frequently, as long as I know things are good between you and me, I can tackle anything that I approach. Mm-hmm. But the instant that something's off, I lose I say, hold on, time out. Let's back up. I want to make sure we're okay. And then I can move forward. And that's just been my own. I don't know that I necessarily got that from anybody in particular. The whole, as long as we're good, everything else will happen on its own. But that's just a personal practice I've had. And so the more I thought about it and tried to play devil's advocate in my mind, which I credit my father for, always see everything, every side of everything as much as you can. But I thought about it. I am more successful because I married well, I would say, in my experience. So I appreciate that. Now,
but you ask about my rules of success. Those are your
for sure.
but the point is that's what resonates with you. So for people that aren't married, no, you don't have to be married to be successful, to be happy, to be well-rounded. But that was my rule, because until I met Cindy, I was lost. Yeah.
That's a fair point. Those are my rules. I like to apply whatever you're telling me and see if it fits within what I'm doing. But I would love to kind of transition, if there was even a transition, like I said, that both are pretty intertwined, into the professional. Something I'd like to ask any of my guests on here, what would you consider to be your greatest professional accomplishment, either so far or at all? Meaning, if you're kind of ending the tenure of your professional career at all, if you still see yourself going for a few more years, maybe so far.
I tell the story of Edmund Hillary. His first attempt up Mount Everest, he failed. He left 5 of his party dead in the snows of Everest. a group came, asked him to speak, and he walked out on the stage, and they applauded him. He didn't think that he needed to be praised because he failed the first time before he conquered Mount Everest. And he looked at the picture of Mount Everest on one of the walls. He said, "Mount Everest, you beat me the first time, but I'm going to beat you the second time because you've grown all you're going to grow, but I am still growing." So my greatest victories after 50 years of marriage, my greatest victories as a husband are ahead of me. After 50 years in the business world, my greatest victories are ahead of me. If I looked at my victories professionally, there are two things, there are a couple of subsets, but having worked for Zig Ziglar, of all the people that asked him for jobs, of all the people that probably begged him like I did, "Let me go to work for you," I got the job and I lasted 29 years. And he literally still changes my life. That was such a great accomplishment for me to come from where I was to be able to go out and represent him because I held him at such high esteem. That was a great victory. A side note, a smaller note to that would be I was in the Philippines in 1993. Now you're looking at a guy that couldn't sell. Seriously, when I got to Dallas after 6 years of selling, I was now a sales trainer and I had no confidence that I could sell. That doesn't mean I didn't sell a lot. I did. I sold my furniture and I sold my car, but I was struggling. So in 1993, after I'd gotten a hold of Zig for several years, obviously, I was in the Philippines. And the sponsor asked us, my partner and I from the Ziegler Corporation, to go out and make a sales call on the national telephone company there in Manila. So I'm sitting there and I'm making a sales call halfway around the world from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And the guy said, "Let me go get my partner. Let me go get my leadership development training guy." He said, "But I was at your seminar yesterday and I really appreciate you're using what you taught us." And that was just a confirmation that nobody ever told me that on a sales call before. So that was a big deal, on a memory. But I believe that I'm still growing. I believe my greatest contracts are ahead of me. The people that I try to help, I think I've got a great future ahead of me for the end of my career.
I love that. One of my favorite phrases is, "You're either growing or you're dying."
Yeah. Either make dust or eat dust.
I like that. I know you spent a great deal of time with Zig, and your speaking style is even similar to his. I read that your motivation for working with him started with having read one of his books. But I guess, first of all, is that true? But what was in the book that made you want to shift your career? What was it about Zig Ziglar that made you say, "I'm not giving up until he gives me a job"?
1978, I get to Dallas. I'm with 24 other people on the marketing training staff. They're from big cities. Kathy's from Chicago, Linda's from New York, Roger's from Boston, Mike was from Atlanta, and I was from Baton Rouge, and I didn't deserve to be there. And one of my buddies said, "Go buy this book." So for $12.95, I went to a downtown Dallas bookstore, and I bought a copy of Zig's book entitled "See You at the Top." Now, hold on a second. Wait, I'll be right back. For the people in the listening audience, I just got my first book 42 years ago, and as Mike can see, it's falling apart. But
as I'm looking at it, the covers are barely even available. I mean, they're not even attached to the book. It's just
the binding is gone.
Yep.
But I'll read what changed my life. On page 48. Zig was talking to me. Now, he wrote this book 4 years before I read it. But on page 48, he says to me very specifically, "You cannot consistently perform in a manner that is inconsistent with the way you see yourself." You cannot consistently perform in a manner that is inconsistent with the way you see yourself. Now, my mother told me that for 30 years. Cindy had told me that for the 8 years we'd been married. But until I read that, Micah, I was missing success by 12 inches. And that's the distance between my head and my heart. Intellectually, IBM had taught me to be a salesperson. I understood about how to, quote, overcome objections, demonstrate products, but I never felt successful. And Zig said, Bryan, let's raise your deserve level. So 2 years later, after that, reading a book, 2 years later, I go to San Francisco to the largest branch office of the IBM division, and I was their sales manager. What changed? Bryan more than the professional. So Zig was building the person. IBM was only building the professional. Now you need both. You need will and skill. And I certainly don't knock IBM. IBM was very good to me. But I found out that I needed to invest in myself more than my career. And that was the life changer for me.
I jotted down that quote because I want to hold on to that one. That's a good one. There have been a few examples in my own life where it's kind of rocked my own perception of myself, and that's made me want to grow, as we've been talking about. Have you ever heard of Flippin?
Oh yeah, no.
Another repetitive name. Yeah, I've had the pleasure of meeting him. That meeting was set up because I just emailed somebody that was connected to him, and I said, "Can I just thank him in person?" Yeah. His book, The Flip Side, is literally the reason my self-confidence has gotten new life.
For me, it was Zig.
Yep.
Now the problem was I read Zig in '78. I didn't read the Bible. I read the one-year Bible between June 3rd, 1988 and June 1st, 1989. I wish I'd have read them in a different order, but I wasn't ready. So when the student is ready, the teacher will come. And
accurate. Having been a teacher, that's accurate. Yeah. Having been a teacher, it's very accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your experience like working with Zig? I know you've mentioned a couple examples of we got to increase the deserve level. Yeah. What was it about your experience working with him that was impactful? Was it, I know you, for example, you just mentioned that IBM was great in their own capacity, in their own right, developing the professional, as you talked about, but Zig focused on developing the person inside of the professional setting. So what else was it like just working for Zig? Even from what was a typical day like on the job working with him?
Well, Zig didn't come to the steerage area where we worked. My favorite way of introducing Zig, he's the most consistent man I've ever met. So later on, back in the early 2000s, when I say this, in '96, he and his wife and I went overseas for 6 weeks to a Pacific Rim tour from Australia to New Zealand, back to Australia to Singapore to different places, Philippines, etc. So I sat at the foot of the mast, and I've got a journal in my room in there, Micah, and I've got 2 notebooks that I would sit at the foot of the mast, and I'd say, well, how did you come up with this story? And I'd be taking notes. And I said, well, Gene, when he was making these stupid decisions that he talks about, where were you? I was his wife. I was right by him, supporting him the whole way. And she kind of got adamant about it. And she's a very wonderful.
Like, that's a ridiculous question. I was right next to him.
Exactly. And she kind of snapped at me almost in her own way. But I've seen him counsel troubled employees. I've seen him ask a guy from New Zealand who could not come forth with the money to pay us for a large contract to do 3 engagements in New Zealand. He was going to lose all kind of money. I've seen Zig at the graveside of his 45-year-old daughter, and he's always been Zig. He's the most consistent man I've ever met. He was a good finder. He looked for the good in people. He believed in people too much sometimes because that was his fault. He got in these deals early in his life because he kind of believed too many people. But when he became a Christian in 1972, he wrote a book in '74. In that early 70s, when the July 4th weekend, he says he declared his dependence on Christ, everything changed for him. So all of the stuff he had went through a different filter. All of his teachings now went through a spiritual and a scriptural filter. And he got it that way because he asked theologians, he asked prominent ministers, he had their He had them on the Rolodex, on the speed dial, if you will, in those days. And that would really turn it around. I met him when he had come out of being secular and being more Christian. So I saw the trueness of Zig's philosophy. And he changed it a bit. He did some things. He reworded some things. So I saw him when he was at his prime, and it was really a blessing to be with him. My job was to sell training, develop the training, go out and deliver the training. We worked with seminars with him, but he worked out of his home most of the time that I worked with him. He had an office in his home, which was great. But when he came to the office, he was on purpose. He was intentional. When you wanted to talk to him about something that was on your agenda, you set an appointment with him, because I honored his time that much. I didn't want to just grab him and say, can you get 5 minutes in the conference room? I didn't think that was fair, because he was so organized. So I enjoyed, I learned, I watched people respond to him. I saw how humble he was. We came off the stage in, I think, Tampa or Melbourne, Florida. And I said, Zig, you hit every point, man. You backed that up. You had a support point. I said, that was great. And he said to me, we worship an awesome Lord, don't we? I mean, Zig, I'm talking about your performance.
Out of left field.
No, we worship an awesome God.
So what event caused you, I guess, or was it just a natural next step to split off and do your own thing, have your own company? Was it, I mean, did Zig kick you out and say, all right, Bryan, time for you to do it on your own? Or was it just something else?
I kicked myself out the first time.
First time, okay.
Yeah, back in 88. Yeah, back in 88. I got caught up in my profession. I came home one night late, and Cindy said, it's easier for me when you're traveling. I'm sorry? It's easier for me when you're not here. What do you mean? You go to nice places, you have concierge service, you have room service, you dine in. Let me tell you something, pal. When you go to bed tonight, there's not going to be a chocolate mint on your pillow. Everything was an inconvenience when I got home, and she saw that. So I went to Zig and I said, I need to do something. Can you keep me in town? He said, not right now. We need you on the road, need you to do this, that, and the other. I said, well, here's my resignation letter. And I'd found a job that kept me in Dallas. And he said, Bryan, is this a better opportunity for you? I said, yes, sir. Money's about the same, but it keeps me in town. He said, well, I sell opportunity. So if this is a better opportunity, and he released me. When he said that, he said, you have my permission to leave. And he also said to me, which was very heartwarming, anytime you want to come back, the door's open. And he didn't say that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I went to work for this group. I grew up a little bit. I found Christ during that period away. And then when my company wanted to do healthcare, and I wanted to leave that and get back into sales training, I went back to Zig with open arms. He received me. Then in 2005, I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to keep the residuals. I didn't want to share it. And I wanted to kind of have my own company, but still be a part of the Ziegler Corporation as a contractor. So in 2005, I started my own business because I needed some equity. I told my mother, I think I'll work my way into the will. And she said, do you have a Z in your name? I said, no, I don't have a Z in my name. She said, didn't you work your way into the will? So it was time for me to venture out on my own. And I still worked for him really until 2015. He passed away in November of 2012. He retired in 2010. But his son has taken the company in a different direction, a good direction, but it really didn't have corporate training in it. So that's why I've not been affiliated with Ziegler for several years, is that I wanted to be a corporate trainer.
That's amazing. Especially you said it very quickly, but you said Zig retired in 2010 and 2 years later passed away.
Yeah.
So he was working right up to that wooden coffin. I mean,
yeah, he had a fall in his home in March of 2007, and that triggered his dementia. So he couldn't go on stage and remember what point comes next. So his daughter started traveling with him, and she would interview him on stage. And we'd get letters from
incredible.
People. I saw Julie and Zig on stage, and I went home and I called my daddy. Hadn't talked to my daddy in 2 years. I went home and I was inspired. So he reached a lot of lives, even though he wasn't as lucid as he was in his prime.
So as you are training other executives, corporations, sales staff, anything like that, what are the biggest obstacles that people in sales face, or what is the most common problem that people that you've hired to go fix? I mean, what is the most common theme that you see?
People fail in sales because they don't work hard.
Please elaborate.
Yeah, that's a life lesson, not a sales lesson. The biggest problem I run into sales, most people don't want to be salespeople. And so they want to use an euphemism of executive counselor, advisor, financial assistant. We're salespeople. We've done a poor job of selling our profession to the next generation. Now at A&M, I think Dr. Jones at A&M, Eli Jones at A&M is putting together a nationwide best program on selling. He did that at Houston, University of Houston, and he's doing that. He did that at LSU, University of Arkansas, and I think he's back to his home roots of Texas A&M. Those universities are about 50 in the nation that are raising up a new generation of salespeople. But Micah, the biggest thing I see for people your age, and I'm picking on you a little bit, is that you hide behind social media. We've taught people how to use their thumbs on a device. We've never taught people how to shake hands. These younger people getting into sales, they're missing the relationship element. They can contact people, they can identify people, they can connect with people through internet. But what do you say once you get there? See, that's the problem they have. They don't know what to say. And what happens, the number one mistake they do, they put their passion ahead of their talent and they oversell the product. Let me get to the product as quickly as I can. That's my comfort zone. As opposed to putting your product behind your back and saying, POGO, what are your goals? What are your obstacles? And if you reach those, what's the benefit? If I can help you get there, would that be beneficial enough to take a look at my recommendation? Well, now I'm going to present my product. But the biggest problem, the number one mistake people make is that they lead with product. They don't lead with need, in my humble opinion.
That's accurate. I don't disagree on the front of we've lost that personal connection, the environment. I to backtrack a little bit, I grew up during the transition from, I'm going next door to go hang out with my friend and we may go play outside in the cul-de-sac to, we now have a wireless phone on the wall over here. Now there's caller ID. Wait, you have a cell phone? What's a mobile phone? A cell phone, does it have a brain cell in there? I don't know what this is. And then transitioning all the way till I was in high school when I got my first cell phone, and you had a limit to how many you could text and all that. So I've seen my personal roots rooted in that personal connection and that friendship that's face-to-face, not FaceTime, but actual FaceTime. And while I agree to an extent that especially the generations that didn't grow up like that, even like I did, they're not getting that. My nephews, for example, they get in front of people and they get real awkward sometimes, because they don't know how to interact. Now you get them on social media and it seems normal on social media, but in person it's very different. The only caveat I'll add is that while we don't, like I'm admitting, we don't always know what to say in person. We don't know how to interact in person. We don't know how to communicate non-verbally in person, even by what we wear sometimes, right? The difference is we've also adapted. So the new influencers on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, that sort of thing, they are selling to the generation that's only on social media by promoting it in a way that is, I don't know, enticing, whether it's on TikTok, like you and I've talked about. I still don't exactly know how that all works or whatever. But they're finding ways to use that media to then sell, promote, which to me, promotion is selling yourself, right? So selling in general, they're adding that new whole segment to our society of social media sales. So I agree. In person, not that great, but we have learned and adapted with the technology that's been given to us to then go and sell. I mean,
well, but I think we've been blessed with having the media that makes it easy for us to go. I don't think we're spending time learning how to sell.
Okay. Explain. What do you mean?
I think I can contact you. Hey, Michael, we're on LinkedIn. I see you've got a friend that you went to A&M with, and I've got a buddy that's about the same age, and I'd like to sit down with you for 5 minutes and discuss your business. I can do that. I can do that through Facebook. I don't know about instant chat or whatever it is, Snapchat, whatever those are. The Twitters of the world. I'm just not on those outlets. But what do I do when I get there? What do I do when we're sitting at a coffee shop or in your office? If I don't have a sales process, then I'm speaking. I'm not selling. I'm just talking. And what happens, we have a tendency to over-explain our products and under-explain the solution our product brings. And that's what I'm running. You asked earlier, what's the challenge? And the challenge is I'm a believer that selling is a process, not a personality. When I was only using my personality, my gosh, I was bad. When I got a process, everything changed. I had enough confidence to know when to use my personality. But process takes pressure off the person, both the salesperson and the prospect person. And if you don't, I'm working on this. I'm sorry, I'm rambling here. I'm working on this 2 sentences that don't write them down. They're not worth it. Just because you have the ability, and you know this as a singer, just because you have the ability to carry a tune does not mean you have the ability to sing. Just because you had the ability to talk does not mean you had the ability to sell.
That I've used that example in different words with other things. For example, there are only particular types of hats that I can wear that I don't look absolutely ridiculous in. Just because I have a head doesn't mean that hat's going to look good on it, or that hairstyle, or whatever.
Just because I can get into this suit doesn't mean I should wear it.
Very accurate. That's something that whenever we got married, I told Elizabeth, I said, I really like trucker hats. I just don't look good in them. I look very odd. And she said, no, I mean, anybody can look good in a trucker hat. So I said, okay, find one. I put it on. She goes, yeah, we're not going to wear trucker hats anymore. I said, I tried to tell you. I just know that they look good on other people, and I can admit that they look good on other people. That hat by itself looks great on the mannequin or whatever, but it does not look good on my head. So I think knowing personal limitations is a very healthy exercise as well.
That's right.
I want to know, for the next generation, are you training up the next Padawan, the next, Zig Ziglar to Bryan Flanagan to the next Padawan to become the next Jedi of sales like you did, or are you handing it off in a different direction? What's the goal?
Corporately, I'm involved with a couple of universities. University of Texas at Dallas has a top 5 sales certification program in the marketing department. So a student can go through UTD and concentrate in sales and have 12 to 15 hours of sales credits within the marketing degree. Corporate America is looking for those kids because next Wednesday, I'll spend half a day, unfortunately virtually, and I'll have maybe 10 kids that do 15-minute sales calls, and they're in a room with 10, they're in a room with me, but 10 other people, sales managers, sales vice presidents, are grading these kids in the sales competition at UTD. So I'm involved with raising up that generation of salespeople, because selling has taken me around the world. Selling is I could put my children in the college of their choice. Why Patrick wanted to go to LSU, I don't know. But selling,
me neither.
Yeah, it was still accredited when he was there. And what happens is that I think that we need to have a new generation of salespeople. I think we sell our way out of recessions. I don't think we legislate our way out of recessions. So corporately, I'm trying to do that. I've worked with University of Florida, University of North Carolina, et cetera, et cetera. On an individual side, I've been looking for a replacement for me, and I've come close. We've got a couple of guys and right now they're both men, that I'm trying to sponsor, mentor, whatever. We've used some with one of the large manufacturing companies earlier this year. He learned my program. He went out when I was in one city. He was in the other city. So we've done some of that. But my legacy is already set. I'm not worried about, I don't worry about legacy. And so when I want to retire, somebody may take my book of business. It's not going to be worth very much because there's no collateral. It's just training relationships. So I'm looking for somebody that would may take my product, learn it, and go sell it. And they give me a royalty, that's fine. If not, go get them Tiger. But I haven't found that one person that I'm settled on yet.
Well, I guess in a way, whatever the other side of the coin to a trick question is, you have that answer. You know, I said, are you training the one Padawan? Well, yes, and then some. You know, you're not just training one, you're training, it sounds like, classfuls of students up and coming into the new generation. And just for anybody listening, this is something I went through when I was a financial planner, wrapping my mind around what is actual sales. And really I'm sure you could elaborate more eloquently than I could, but it can apply to so many different things, whether it's a subtle decision about where we're going for dinner, to will you marry me? Or for me, trying to convince my child to do something that I know makes perfect sense and is completely healthy for you and is actually a really great decision. But I got to sell that little girl on why it's a good decision for her, you know, and what need does that fit for her? So I know sometimes people recoil at the word sales. Sure. When the fact is it's involving a lot of what we already are doing.
It's just not on our business card. Robert Louis Stevenson said, everybody makes a living selling something. The problem is everybody's in sales. Only the successful ones admit it.
That's accurate. It took me a while even just to admit that I am a salesman as a financial planner, because for me in my head, I was all about the relationship and getting to know somebody and seeing, is there a way that I can actually either bring peace to your situation or add value to what you already have going on? And it was about the person.
When we first met, my impression was that you in the service business, your selling was servicing the relationships that you developed. And I'm a big believer that the greatest play in baseball is a sacrifice bunt. Because the kid gives himself up to put a man from first to second so they can reach home safely. But in coaching your kids, they don't want to bunt, they want to hit away. And it's a big sacrifice. They got to wait 9 other people to get back in the batter's box. Well, that's what salespeople do. Sometimes we got to sacrifice long hours, traveling, asking hard questions, eating a little humble pie. But if you're really selling, you're putting your daughter or your friend or your client in a position to reach home safely. And that's what we do. If I don't help you reach home safely, whatever safely means, then I'm not going to make a sale.
I like that. I wish I'd known you a few years prior. It would have definitely helped me out. But I think, you know, things are landing right where they are. And now I get to focus on exactly what you and I did in that coffee shop, which is building a relationship, building a friendship, getting to know one another, and hearing, I mean, what the incredible things are that you're doing. That's what this whole show is about in the first place, just giving you that platform. I want to know, as we talked about this a little bit with the goal of what's your greatest achievement professionally, but as you continue through your life, what's the one thing, if it happened, that you would look back knowing you did what you were made for? And I'm speaking more so in a professional sense, but if you want to offer up a personal.
Well, and Michael, one of my buddies who's gone through a lot of turmoil in his life with his nuclear family, then his wife, he's divorced, he's got an estranged daughter, et cetera, et cetera. And he asked me many years ago, well, what's your motivation? I said, very simple, one word, family. No, I mean, what's your real motivation? Wait a minute. Well, he didn't have a family.
I wasn't lying the first time I told you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Personally, my wife is my greatest accomplishment, said in a very positive way. Yeah, I just have so much admiration for her. The children come next. Earthly bound, the children come next. I was a pretty good son. I think mom and dad were proud of me. One of the things that my dad died when I was 20, and I tell my children, I didn't have an adult relationship with him. But what I did have was that when he died, he knew I loved him and I knew he loved me. And if I can die that way with my children, ain't a bad way to go. I mean, that was the linchpin there. I found my calling, if you will, probably in I was 36 when I got into this business. I wanted to coach tall people. I wanted to teach tall people. I was going to be a high school basketball coach, and there's just no money in Louisiana with a married couple, both teaching school back in the 70s. Whoa.
Not a lot has changed. I can say that having both of us been teachers in this family.
You've lived that, and you've lived it recently, so magnify that. So getting into something that I always wanted to do, the reason I left IBM only allowed you to do a specific job for 2 to 3 years. In other words, I could sell. I was a salesman. I got to marketing training. I was a trainer. I got to sales manager. I was a manager. Well, Zig allowed me to create products, sell the products, train the products, and at some time manage a team of people. So I could be in the same company doing all the things I liked, as opposed to with IBM, they segmented you over time blocks. So that's really one of the reasons I could sell, train, and manage and not have to change careers or change cities that sometimes you have to do with IBM. So I found that calling, and I do have a passion for salespeople that want to be successful, but the tumblers haven't come into place. I struggled with it look, I was raised the same way you were. Your mother told you the same thing my mom told me. Don't talk to strangers. Don't ask people for money. So I went into sales. So some people are counterintuitive, and I try to make it easy. I try to take the mystique out of selling.
My friends and my mom, but my mom is who I got this from, so I thought it was a little hypocritical, and I say that a little tongue in cheek. But I always got Micah, you talk too much. So my joke was, okay, I became a teacher, and then I became a financial planner where I'm talking a bit, and now I'm hosting a podcast. So yeah, I do. I'm going to just own it and make it my life. As we start
I think that worked out very well.
Use it to my advantage, right? Yeah. Have a job where I'm literally talking to middle schoolers all day long. And then it finally, after 2 years of teaching, it was kind of in my rough second year of teaching, I discovered that, my students actually learn more when I talk less. Shocking. Right?
And so do customers.
Yeah, that applies to, as I say, big students, right? Adult students.
Across the board.
I may have told you this before, and I think I've even said this on the podcast, but my philosophy is that adults are middle schoolers with better masks.
Yeah.
And you get them on vacation and they look identical. But as we start to wrap up here, I wanted to know, this is just kind of the way I like to land this plane, any interview that I have. What encouragement would you give to those listening? And if you want to answer this kind of, it might be the same answer. What encouragement would you give to those in sales right now, especially during the pandemic? I know plenty of people are facing tough times, and any encouragement would help, even if it's from an LSU Tiger.
Yeah. And it's something I've had to use myself. I've gotten back during this pandemic. I've gotten back into reading my daily devotional, Oswald Chambers, My Utmost for His Highest, written in 1917. Toughest 3 minutes of my day is going through Oswald Chambers. So one of the things we need to have is a discipline. If you want to have 5 minutes of great inspiration, go to YouTube or PragerU, Prageru.com, PragerUniversity.com. Whatever you find this guy, find a former Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink. You
have hit the jackpot, or the jockpot, I guess. You just stepped on a landmine. I am the biggest fan of Jocko Willink, and am a big fan of his podcasts, his books. I've promoted them. I've even got stickers on the water bottle that you don't have of mine, the one that's here. Got stickers of his phrases, stand by to get some. Gosh, I can't even remember. I don't have it in front of me, but yes, I've definitely heard of Jocko Willink. Please continue.
Well, discipline equals freedom.
That's the sticker. That's the sticker I have on there.
Now, my vision, we teach in sales, you get new information, you have a chance to make a new decision. People only make new decisions when they have new information. So I love motivation, but what Jocko taught me was that motivation is kind of a intangible, but discipline is a little bit more measurable, and it's a little bit more action-based than thought-based or emotion-based. And I really like that. Discipline will set you free. So one of the things we need to do is realize, number one, that our skills are still solid. Even though we're going through the pandemic, we don't have the face-to-face. When some selling situations, it's more technology-based now, that's okay. But you still have skills. And no matter where you are, two things make a difference in your success. And this is especially true with this pandemic. Number one, work ethic. You better have a work ethic. Again, Dad taught me to play all 9 innings. And number two, self-belief. I can't give away something I don't have. So if I don't believe that I can serve you, I deserve to serve you, then it's not going to be as successful. So those are two things that I work on is continuing to hold myself accountable with a work ethic and remember that you still have skills. Don't compare the circumstances to your abilities. Your ability not to wear a trucker's hat doesn't mean you're a bad looking guy. Well, but it doesn't mean that you have lesser skills or abilities. What it means is you have a different circumstance.
Subjectively, I'm not too bad looking, but we'll save that for another time. I appreciate what you just said. Even just the self-worth and the deserving aspect. That's something that I personally have always fought with internally. I was actually taught growing up by my dad that we deserve nothing, and if we get something, we should be grateful. So it was drilled in me so much, and to his credit, I think that there is definitely a healthy limit with which to understand that, believe that sort of thing. But it became such an issue in my mind that I literally deserved nothing. So even when I had worked hard for something and earned it, I didn't deserve it. I earned it. And somebody'd say, look, man, you deserve what you got. Good job. Way to go. And no. I didn't deserve this. I earned it. And they're like, well, that's the same thing. No. It has to be different in my mind. So I appreciate what you're saying, because I think a lot of people deal with self-confidence issues. Sometimes too much self-confidence, sometimes not enough.
Works both ways. That's exactly right. An extension of a strength can become a weakness. Absolutely.
And one thing that I'll say to people out there who are maybe dealing with self-confidence, if you realize that people aren't helping or people don't understand, what you're going through, the symptom of a complete lack of self-confidence and the symptom of an abundance of self-confidence is the same. You're looking for the spotlight, whether it's for affirmation or confirmation. And I definitely was I needed somebody to tell me, no, you're actually worth something, because I had no confidence. And I think what you're talking about here, Bryan, is going to really help people that are listening. And maybe they listened in thinking, he's the sales guru, he's going to tell us about sales. And I hope that they leave this conversation having a more healthy perspective of themselves.
Well, you reminded me of some things, so thank you. Some of these things was below the surface, so thank you for surfacing those areas.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Last but not least, as we close out this, would love to know, again, the name of your company and how people can best contact you to maybe speak at their company.
Thank you. Flanagan Training Group is my company. The website is www.flanagantraining.com, and it's spelled FLANAGAN training. If you've got pen or pencil, my phone number is 214-505-3600. 5109. And the email address is brian@flanagantraining.com.
And that's BRYAN.
BRYAN, spelled the correct way.
There you go. Yeah, I know. I've got a couple friends that are named Brian, and I have to. Okay, is that the I or the Y? That's the Y.
Yeah, well, they only have one eye. Yeah, see, the guys that spelled it incorrect only have one eye. You ready for a dad joke?
There you go.
You want to match some dad jokes?
Let's do it. Let's close out the show with a good dad joke.
Why don't blind people skydive? It scares their dogs. And when blind people do skydive, how do they realize they're getting close to the ground? The leash gets slack.
Oh my God. Folks, that is Bryan Flanagan. I appreciate you being on this show. And I hope that people are laughing, because I certainly am. I've got 4 dogs and I still find that joke hilarious. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Take care of yourself. Be safe.
Yes, sir. Same to you. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Micah Brown podcast with Bryan Flanagan. I hope you enjoyed laughing as much as I did, especially with the final nail in the coffin of the dad joke. Nail in the coffin. Dog leash. Rough. Hey! That was not intentional. Anyway, wanted to once again reiterate the ways that he said you could get in contact with him. That's flanagantraining.com is the website for his company. That's FLANAGAN training.com. Flanagan has all A's in it as far as vowels go. Again, Brian@flanagantraining.com is his email address. That's BRYAN. And last but not least, he gave out his cell phone number, so I will also be sure to give out his cell phone number. But Brian's number is 214-505-5109. Let him know that you heard him on the podcast. I'm sure he'll cringe at that and probably wonder what you remember and what you don't, just because he likes to be comical like that. Nonetheless, I hope you have a takeaway from this episode that you enjoyed, that you learned, and maybe some encouragement. Finally, he does have a book. He didn't even mention it. He might have, he mentioned writing one, but he didn't mention the title. It's So You're New to Sales. You can definitely find that on the interwebs. In fact, you can find it on Amazon, probably get it with Prime, but it is also on Audible. So you can get it on Amazon for about $29. You can also get it on Audible. And if you want to listen to that for free, you can do that by going to audibletrial.com/MBP. That'll get you the free 30-day trial. If you knock it out within 30 days, it doesn't cost you any money. Just an idea. I would recommend keeping your trial so that you can continue listening to audiobooks that we recommend here on the podcast. But Bryan has some amazing tidbits of wisdom, even in his book, and I think that you'll definitely enjoy it and learn something and be encouraged. So thank you so much for listening today. By all means, connect to us on all the social media platforms from whatever platform you're listening from, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or even Stitcher that we're now a part of. So connect to us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm even on LinkedIn. You can just find me by searching Micah Brown. You'll notice, because I do have my logo and my slogan in my header picture or my profile picture, which is myself. Thank you so much for listening. You all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.